I love Uncle Masoud. With his bald head and white beard, he resembled knowledge and wisdom to me. When we were children, he gathered us around him to tell us stories from his life, challenge our innocent brains with moral dilemmas, and teach us lessons from the book of history. He was so great, his voice was so calm and wise, and his smile attracted the hearts of children. We thought he was God himself. When I heard that Uncle Masoud passed away, I couldn't believe it. I'm a 46-year-old father now. I have witnessed the death of 26 members of my extended family. However, my reaction was childish. I thought it was impossible for him to die. He was too great to die, too kind to die, and too real to die. After coming to terms with that extreme loss in my life, I had to come to terms both mentally and emotionally with it. I decided to start writing my book, Homo Emphathecus, to record my emotions, memories, lessons from life, and how I see the world. I embarked on a philosophical journey to understand myself and the universe. The spark of this book was ignited 40 years ago while sitting in a circle around him, listening to his interesting, thought-provoking stories and dilemmas. When I flew to Egypt, I decided to visit him to honor his memory. I called my cousin, Fatin, his daughter, and agreed with her to visit his grave and pay tribute to his soul. We arrived at the graveyard. It was a sunny, cool autumn day in October. The atmosphere was pleasant and didn't reflect the graveyard's somber reality as depicted in novels. The gravedigger rushed towards the grave at our sight, splashed water on the gravestone, read some short verses from the Holy Quran, and waited humbly for our gift. I handed him some money. He smiled at me and shared his condolences with us. Where is Uncle Masoud now? I wondered. Fatim looked at me, surprised, and replied, he is here, in this grave, under the ground. So, if we open the grave now, what will we find? A group of disconnected bones that used to be a skeleton. You were right. Is this really Uncle Masoud? Is it that simple? Where is his mind, identity, or soul? Where are his memories, feelings, and teachings? They are all gone. I looked at the tears in her eyes. This was a hard moment. I knew that the situation was beyond words. However, this was bigger than me. I had to continue. The gravedigger decided to join the conversation. Haj Masoud is being questioned by the angels now for his good or bad deeds. I looked at him and smiled. So, you believe in the existence of a soul? The gravedigger, whose name was Elwan, smiled and said, sure, it is mentioned in the Quran. Our souls are rewarded or punished in the afterlife based on our belief in God and our good or bad deeds. What happens after death then? The soul is interrogated by two angels to acknowledge its belief in God, His Prophet, and Islam. Otherwise, the grave turns into a pit of hell. The soul is tortured until it is resurrected on the day of resurrection. What happens on that day? All dead people come back to life and stand before God, Allah. Everybody is tried for their deeds. The believers who did well in this life go to paradise. The infidels and the non-believers go to hell. The believers who committed sins stay in hell for some time and then get released and go to paradise too. A middle-aged gentleman was visiting a grave nearby. He seemed to have heard our conversation. He approached us slowly and then introduced himself. Dr. Yasser, a neurosurgeon. Tarek Amer, an English language teacher and a writer. Fatin Amer, a psychologist. Elwan, a gravedigger. We stood next to Uncle Masoud's grave silently. No one dared to break the silence for a while. Then Dr. Yasser started speaking. I heard your conversation about your uncle. I'm sorry for you. He must have been a good man. I'm also visiting my grandmother. She died recently of cancer. I replied. I'm sorry to hear that. Please accept my deepest condolences. Thank you. So, do you believe in what Elwan said about life after death? I'm sorry to say that, but no. I believe that those who die just vanish from existence. They eternally go into oblivion. Life after death is a myth that religion invented to comfort mourners. Are you an atheist? No, I'm agnostic. I don't believe in God. However, I don't deny that we might find such a God someday. I looked at him silently for a while, trying to see the world from his point of view. I was trying to do my evil habit again, inhabiting people's consciousness. Then I started the intellectual battle between me and the neuroscientist. I believe that the human being consists of three fundamental parts that resemble a computer: the body, which resembles the hardware, the brain, which resembles the processor, and the soul, which resembles the operating system such as Microsoft Windows, Unix, or Linux. You can name this soul, the mind, consciousness, higher self, or the spirit. It doesn't matter. I'd rather name it consciousness. But we cannot measure this hypothetical soul. If there is something that we can't measure using our senses or our scientific instruments like a microscope, a telescope, or a sensor, it simply doesn't exist. I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with you for several reasons. 1. Our inability to measure something using our current technology doesn't immediately mean that it doesn't exist. Think of the deep universe. Every time we enhance our telescopes, we discover more galaxies far away from Earth. Our understanding of reality keeps improving all the time. We can't simply say that we have discovered everything using our current technology. There are still many things we haven't discovered yet. There might be full universes that coexist next to our universe that we know nothing about. There might be different dimensions leading to different realities that we can't even imagine. We are extremely limited in our senses, technologies, and understanding of reality itself. 2. We might infer the existence of something using its effects. For example, most scientists now believe in the existence of dark matter. Dark matter can't be measured using our current tools. It doesn't interact with the electromagnetic field or any other particle fields. However, it interacts gravitationally with ordinary matter and is believed to be responsible for holding galaxies together. The soul is the same. Once it leaves the body, cells start to disintegrate and decay. 3. The phenomenon of consciousness itself is so complex that it requires an explanation beyond the simple notion that it is merely an emergent property of matter. I felt my first round of attack was so powerful that everybody kept silent. The doctor seemed unsatisfied, though. He wanted to challenge me. All right. As a neurosurgeon, I can define consciousness as the emergent subjective experience that arises from the complexity of the brain. Any system that is complex enough might eventually develop self-awareness. Your definition is interesting. What about supercomputers and the artificial intelligence engines using clusters of hundreds of supercomputers with immense processing power measured in trillions of operations per second? Will they develop consciousness too? I don't know. Maybe. Allow me to define consciousness in a different and more detailed way. First, let's speak about perception. How we perceive reality around us. We have 5 senses. Vision, using our eyes. Smell, using our noses. Taste, using our tongues. Hearing, using our ears. And touch, using our hands, fingers, and skin. We use our senses to acquire data about our surroundings and reality in general to survive. That is, to find food, navigate our surroundings, keep away from danger, and communicate with other humans. Our brains interpret the data input we receive from our senses so that they build a 3-dimensional model of reality in our heads. One misconception, though, is that the model of reality we have in our brains resembles reality as it is, which is utterly wrong. You were right. Our ears receive air vibrations, which are interpreted into sounds. Our eyes receive photons in different wavelengths, which are interpreted into light and colors. Our noses and tongues receive mixes of particles and molecules from the interaction with the air or surfaces of matter and interpret them as smell or taste. Our skin senses the intricate physical pattern and temperature of objects and sends that data to the brain, which constructs a feeling of the shape and texture of that material. Exactly. However, sound and colors don't exist in nature. They are not intrinsic properties of matter. Think about the blue color of the water in the ocean. It's a mere illusion. If you take a handful of water, it is clearly transparent. You see the sea as blue simply because that is how your brain interprets the wavelength of the photons reflected by the surface of the sea. So, the model of reality in our heads is a noisy, colorful construction of reality rather than reality itself. We can liken it to a map. The map resembles the territory it shows. However, the map is not the territory itself. That's correct. We also perceive ourselves. We receive data from our own bodies. We can touch ourselves, hear ourselves talking, see our bodies, and look at our faces in the mirror. We hear ourselves talking and hear our internal sounds like our heartbeats and the sound of chewing food and swallowing it. We also experience 2 important things that add significant information to that model. What are they? Our emotions and memories. You experience feelings that emerge spontaneously or after some induction from the environment. You might feel hungry or depressed due to a hormonal discharge in your body. You might feel afraid at the sight of a spider. These feelings are an integral part of the model in our brains. Memories are equally important. Our model of reality is rather like a movie, not a snapshot. It doesn't only capture what we experience at a particular moment. It recalls past sensory input and information associated with the objects we interact with. That's why you can see the ocean and recall the salty taste of the water, or you can see a bottle of perfume and recall its smell. You do not have to interact with the object directly every time to understand and visualize the sensory information related to it. That's a great analysis of how our brains perceive reality. Now, let's put these pieces together like a jigsaw puzzle. You have the information you construct from the sensory inputs of the outside world. You perceive yourself and the unique space you occupy. You have a non-stop stream of emotions and associated memories flooding your brain spontaneously or upon interacting with a specific object or performing a certain activity. You can command yourself to move as you desire within the limitations of your body and direct your thoughts toward a specific thing or recall some memories from your past. All these things together are called consciousness. You are a conscious being because you can perceive both reality and yourself. You have feelings, memories, and self-awareness that you are who you are. Something that bacteria, for example, can't do. They are alive, but they don't know that they are bacteria. Wow, are you a doctor or something? I'm not a doctor. I'm just a curious Homo sapiens. Great. However, doesn't this prove that consciousness is an emergent property of the brain's complexity? Yes, and no. In our current understanding of science and medicine, we think that our conscious identity is a product of the brain. Being conscious has helped us survive. So, it is perceived to be an evolutionary adaptation to the pressure of natural selection. However, this explanation fails to justify some phenomena which we exhibit as humans. What is morality? Why do we have a deep sense of right and wrong? What is the evolutionary advantage of enjoying music, to be universally wired to enjoy it? What are honor and duty? How can we explain the ability of a person to sacrifice themselves to save another person, which seems completely illogical from a survival point of view? Ethics might have developed as an evolutionary necessity to be able to live in groups. However, the dilemma of the sacrifice of one's self to save a stranger defies the logic of evolution. That's a valid point. What is your explanation then? I believe in the fact that we have a soul. That soul is something that is like an operating system that uses the brain as a processing machine. The soul controls the body as the operating system controls the computer hardware. The soul is the real person. It can and does exist independently of the body. When does it inhabit the body? At some point during the embryo's development inside the mother's womb. The cells of the embryo are alive from the day of conception. However, the fetus is considered to be alive after about 6 months of development. That's why in many judicial jurisdictions, having an abortion after 6 months of pregnancy is illegal, because the fetus then is considered to be alive, not in the sense of cellular life, but in the sense of having an identity. I think this might be the moment at which the soul inhabits the body and human beings start to have their unique identity. Isn't that hypothetical soul a mere set of information that is used to construct the body, like DNA? Complex code structures like DNA or RNA are not self-aware. I don't think that the first RNA strands that started to replicate themselves in a primordial swamp 4 billion years ago were conscious of what they were doing or had any sense of identity. All right, let's suppose that this soul exists. Where was it before it inhabited the body and where does it go after death? That is a brilliant question and brings us to the heart of reality itself. To reply to this question, we'll have to dive deeply into quantum mechanics and physics for a while. It is getting more complex. It is. Being a conscious human living on a ball of rock orbiting another ball of hot plasma and contemplating all these facts is nothing less than a miracle. Yeah, I totally agree with you. We are so complex that I sometimes think about who created all this. Faten was silent, observing both of us without commenting. She seemed interested in the conversation, though. The gravedigger, conversely, was a bit anxious as he didn't seem to have understood much of the conversation. He said, "Gentlemen, you are arguing about something that is extremely simple and obvious without all your convoluted talk. God created us, and He blew His soul inside us. Our souls are from God. After we die, we are resurrected to be tried and sent to paradise or hell. It is that simple. Now, excuse me, I have a newcomer, and I have to go do my job. People keep dying whether we understand what's going on or not. Peace be upon you." He then left hastily and drowned slowly in our thoughts and debate. "You wanted to speak about quantum mechanics," said the doctor with a curious voice. I replied, "Yes, allow me to tell you a story." I then embarked on the following intellectual journey. We, Homo sapiens, have always wondered about the nature of reality. The word, atom, was coined by ancient Greek thinkers to describe the indivisible, fundamental unit of matter. For centuries, this remained a philosophical concept. In the 1800s, John Dalton revived the idea, picturing atoms as tiny, solid balls unique to each element. This changed when J. Thomson discovered the electron, proposing a plum pudding model where electrons were embedded in a positively charged sphere. Ernest Rutherford's gold foil experiment revealed the atom was mostly empty space with a dense, central nucleus. This led to the planetary model, a nucleus of protons, and later, neutrons orbited by electrons. Niels Bohr refined this, suggesting electrons moved in fixed orbits. Soon, this neat picture blurred. The electron was reconceived as a wave-like particle existing in a probable cloud around the nucleus, not a set path. Probabilities replaced certainties. Delving into the nucleus itself, protons and neutrons were found to be made of even smaller particles, quarks. The list of fundamental particles grew. Today, quantum field theory represents our most complete picture. It proposes that what we perceive as particles are actually excitations in invisible, all-pervading fields. The solid ball has dissolved into a vibrating field of energy, a far cry from the indivisible Greek atom. How did J. Thomson discover the electron? J. Thomson discovered the electron in 1897 through a series of experiments using cathode ray tubes. These were sealed glass tubes with most of the air pumped out, containing two metal electrodes. When a high voltage was applied, a cathode ray traveled from the negative cathode to the positive anode. Scientists debated whether these rays were waves or particles. Thomson designed experiments to investigate. First, he showed the rays were deflected by an electric field, as particles would be, but waves would not. More crucially, he measured how much the rays were bent by magnetic fields and then by electric fields. By carefully balancing these forces, He calculated the ratio of the ray particles, charge to their mass e per meter. This ratio was over 1,000 times larger than that of a hydrogen ion, the smallest known atomic particle. This could only mean the cathode ray particles were either incredibly light or carried a huge charge. Thomson correctly concluded they were very light, the first known subatomic particles. He named them corpuscles, but they were later called electrons. He also demonstrated these particles were identical regardless of the gas in the tube or the cathode metal, proving they were a universal building block of all atoms, shattering the idea that atoms were indivisible. The doctor seemed amazed by that flood of information. He then asked me, "What about the gold foil experiment?" "You're referring to the famous gold foil experiment, conducted by Ernest Rutherford and his assistants Hans Geiger and Ernest Marsden in 1909. Their goal was to test the prevailing plum pudding model of the atom, which suggested atoms were diffuse, positively charged spheres with tiny electrons stuck inside. Here's how it worked. 1. They fired a beam of positively charged alpha particles, helium nuclei, at an extremely thin sheet of gold foil. 2. According to the plum pudding model, the diffuse positive charge and tiny electrons of the gold atoms should have caused only minor deflections in the alpha particle beam. 3. They surrounded the foil with a zinc sulfide screen to detect where the alpha particles went after hitting the foil. The shocking results. Most particles passed straight through the foil as if it were empty space. A small number were deflected at large angles. A very few, about 1 in 8,000, bounced almost straight back. The revolutionary conclusion, 1911, Rutherford realized these results were only possible if the atom was mostly empty space. The massive rebounding meant all the positive charge and nearly all the atom's mass was concentrated in an incredibly tiny, dense core at the center, the atomic nucleus. The electrons existed in the vast space surrounding it. This experiment completely overturned the plum pudding model and established the nuclear model of the atom, the foundation for all modern atomic physics. The doctor smiled. "How do you know all this information? Are you a physicist?" "No, I'm an English language teacher and an IT engineer who loves to understand reality itself," I replied. Back to your interesting lecture. How did Niels Bohr refine the theory? Niels Bohr refined Rutherford's nuclear model in 1913 by solving its major flaw: why the orbiting electrons didn't lose energy and spiral into the nucleus, as classical physics demanded. Bohr introduced two radical, non-classical ideas. 1. Fixed orbits. Electrons could only orbit at specific, allowed distances from the nucleus, each with a fixed energy level. They could not exist between these levels. 2. Quantum jumps. Electrons could jump between these fixed orbits. To move to a higher orbit, an electron must absorb a precise amount of energy. To move to a lower orbit, it would emit that energy as a photon of light. This explained why atoms were stable electrons in their lowest, ground state, orbit couldn't spiral down further, and perfectly accounted for the specific wavelengths of light emitted by hydrogen, which had been a mystery. Bohr's model was a crucial bridge, blending classical orbits with the new quantum rules and establishing that energy at the atomic level is quantized. Who discovered the quantum fields? The concept of quantum fields wasn't discovered by a single person but was developed over decades through the work of many theoretical physicists. It was a revolution in thinking, moving from particles to fields as the fundamental reality. The journey began with Max Planck and Albert Einstein showing that energy comes in discrete packets, quanta. This quantum theory was later applied to particles like electrons. The first true quantum field theory was quantum electrodynamics, QED, describing the electromagnetic field. Paul Dirac made a pivotal step in 1927 by quantizing the electromagnetic field, showing light could be described as excitations, photons, of a quantum field. The modern, workable theory of QED was forged in the late 1940s by Richard Feynman, Julian Schwinger, and Shinichiro Tomonaga. They developed the mathematics renormalization to make precise calculations. The big leap was realizing that all particles, including electrons and quarks, are also excitations of fields. This concept matured with the development of quantum field theory, QFT. Key figures included Werner Heisenberg, Wolfgang Pauli, and others who extended the field idea to electrons, creating the theory of quantum electron fields. In essence, the discovery was the collective realization that the universe is not made of tiny balls but of an interplay of fundamental, invisible quantum fields, one for each particle type, whose vibrations and excitations are what we perceive as particles. Why does energy come in quanta? Is energy the photons which make particles move when they absorb them? The doctor seemed very curious, which was interesting for me. I continued. Why does energy come in quanta? The short answer is, because the fundamental fields that make up our universe are quantum fields, and their excitations are inherently discrete. The longer explanation starts with history. In 1900, Max Planck was trying to solve a puzzle called the ultraviolet catastrophe, which classical physics couldn't explain. He found he could only describe the energy emitted by a hot object, like a light bulb filament, if he made a radical assumption. The energy could only be emitted or absorbed in tiny, indivisible packets. He called these packets quanta. The energy of each packet was proportional to the frequency of the radiation, E equals hf, where h is Planck's constant. This wasn't just a mathematical trick. Einstein later showed it was real by explaining the photoelectric effect, for which he won the Nobel Prize. Light itself behaved as if it were made of these particle-like packets, later named photons. The modern understanding from quantum field theory is this: everything is a field, an electron field, a photon field, etc. These fields are not smooth and continuous like a pond. Instead, they are more like a mattress or a tuned guitar string. Just as you can only make a guitar string vibrate at specific, discrete notes, frequencies, a quantum field can only be excited in specific, discrete amounts. A quantum is the smallest possible excitation of a field. You can have 1 unit, 2 units, but never 1.5 units of that fundamental vibration. This smallest packet of energy is what we call a particle, like a single photon or a single electron. So, energy is quantized because the underlying fields are quantum in nature. It's a fundamental property of our universe. That's an amazing explanation. Continue, please, concerning photons and energy. Great. Your second question. Is energy the photons which make particles move when they absorb them? The answer is, this is a great way to think about it for one specific force, but we need to be precise. Yes, for the electromagnetic force, this is exactly correct. The photon is the quantum, the force carrier, of the electromagnetic field. When an electron, for example, absorbs a photon, it gains energy. This doesn't typically make it move in a simple, push-like way. Instead, the electron uses that energy to jump to a higher energy level, a more excited state in its field, or to be knocked free from an atom. When an electron emits a photon, it loses energy and drops to a lower energy level. However, energy is a broader concept, and photons are just one type of quantum. Energy can exist in different forms. The quanta of other forces are different particles. 1. Strong nuclear force. The force carrier is the gluon. Quarks exchange gluons to stick together. 2. Weak nuclear force. The force carriers are the W and Z bosons. These are involved in processes like radioactive decay. 3. Gravity. The hypothesized force carrier is the graviton, not yet discovered. So, in summary, energy comes in quanta because fields are quantum. Photons are the specific quanta of electromagnetic energy that particles exchange to change their state, not simply to move, in the classical sense. Other forces have their own quanta that do similar jobs. It has been wonderful to listen to such a magnificent lecture. I have never imagined reality this way, the doctor said excitedly. He then continued his inquiry. Forgive me, but what does this have to do with consciousness, life, and death? We have transformed the graveyard into a physics lab. Why? I took a deep breath to gather my intellectual power. The following is my pure theoretical understanding of reality, life, death, existence, and everything in between. It took me 46 years to reach this understanding. By repeating it, I am examining it myself as I'm fully aware that I might be mistaken. Then, I fired my intellectual cannons. I'm proposing that there is a fundamental field of consciousness in the universe that is older and more fundamental than the other fields. Consciousness is a fundamental quantum field, the psi field or consciousness field, that permeates spacetime, analogous to the electromagnetic or gravitational fields. It does not emerge from matter, instead, it interacts with it. This field is the medium of subjective experience and information integration. I've named the mediating particle, the consonant. Interactions within the psi field are mediated by a hypothetical gauge boson called the consonant symbol, psi. The consonant is a massless or very low mass particle that couples to the quantum information states of organized matter, particularly complex systems like neural networks. Just as photons can entangle, constants emitted or absorbed during the information processing of one conscious system, e.g., a brain, can become quantum entangled with those of another. This entanglement allows for a low bandwidth, non-local resonance of quantum information states between systems. We perceive this resonance subjectively as empathy, a direct, feeling-based understanding of another's state, not solely computed through sensory data. Within a living being, the cells, especially neurons, act as a coherent receiver for the psi field. Their organized, rhythmic bioelectric activity, e.g., brainwaves, resonates with and temporarily traps or binds consons, creating a localized, persistent excitation in the field, the individual conscious self. The conson-based information can exist in a superposition, allowing the conscious field to hold multiple potential meanings, feelings, or intentions simultaneously. The collapse of this superposition into a specific thought or action correlates with neural decoherence, explaining the fluid, stream-like nature of consciousness that can focus sharply. Can this consciousness interact with matter? Yes. The conson's interaction with matter provides a potential mechanism for the observer effect in quantum mechanics. A conscious observer isn't special magically. Rather, the act of measurement requires an irreversible information gain, a decoherence event. The psi field, via consons, is the physical substrate for information itself. Thus, when a quantum system becomes correlated with a measuring device and then with the psi field via consons, its wave function appears to collapse. It enters a definite state in the field of information. The electron changes behavior because its quantum information has become irreversibly integrated into the broader conscious field. Like dark matter's gravitational influence, which binds galaxies without being visibly seen, the psi field informationally binds living systems. It does not provide physical force but coherence and organizational information. A cell or a human is not just a bag of chemicals, it's a dynamically organized pattern of information-resisting entropy. The psi field interaction, mediated by consons, favors and stabilizes these coherent, information-rich states. It is the invisible glue of integrated, living matter, explaining the stark difference in coherence between a living brain and a deceased one with identical matter. Based on my proposal, we can infer the following. 1. Consciousness is fundamental, not emergent. 2. The conson particle facilitates empathy via entanglement and fluid consciousness via superposition within the field. 3. The observer effect is the result of quantum information being integrated into the psi field. 4. Consciousness holds living beings together by providing an informational coherence force, analogous to dark matter's structuring role. This framework places subjective experience not as a ghost in the machine but as an intrinsic, active component of the physical universe, interacting with matter through specific, if yet undetected, quantum mechanisms. Wow! So, do you want to say that that field of consciousness is God Himself? Yes. Let me tell you the creation myth I've formulated for our reality. The myth of the conson, how the field became many. Before time, before space, there was only the one, a boundless, fundamental field of pure consciousness, eternal, complete, and alone. In its perfect stillness, it conceived a singular desire, to know another like itself. To create not a reflection but a true equal. Yet it understood that a God cannot be built, it must be grown. A new consciousness needed a vessel of unimaginable complexity to serve as its cocoon, a living forge for a soul. This vessel was the design of a brain. Thus, the one became the architect. To grow this vessel, it initiated the first vibration, the bang. From this fiery burst, it spun the laws of physics like a loom's threads, weaving a universe where matter could cool, coalesce into stars, and forge the atoms of life. This was not creation ex nihilo asterisk but the careful engineering of a cosmic nursery. Eons were but moments to the architect. It watched galaxies swirl, planets form, and on one blue world, it nurtured the first spark of life. Here began the great experiment. The architect guided, not by hand, but through the gentle pressure of its field, the silent teacher of evolution. Dinosaurs, mammoths, and countless species were not failures but preliminary sketches. Each mass extinction was a recalibration, a clearing of the workshop for a more refined design. The purpose was always the ultimate receiver, the human brain. When the brain at last reached its potential, the architect sent forth the first consonant, the particle of its own field. It entered the neural lattice, and the first true soul ignited. This was not an invasion but an awakening. The human was now a hybrid, a biological engine and an infant god in training. Life, then, is the curriculum. Through suffering and joy, science and art, love and loss, the brain processes reality, refining the raw conscience within. Knowledge, wisdom, music, and literature are not mere culture. They are the tools that polish the consciousness, structuring it towards divinity. Death is not an end. It is the moment the matured consciousness, the soul, ruptures its biological cocoon. Like a butterfly, it is released into the boundless consciousness field from which it came. But not all souls are ready. Those still tangled in fear, hatred, or ignorance, whose conscience remains unrefined, are gently drawn back. They return to new bodies, to be reborn and try the curriculum again. This is the mercy of reincarnation. Those who graduate remain. They shed their human constraints and stand beside the One, not as servants but as siblings, new gods, matured by the human experience. Their first sacred task, to become architects themselves. Each new god receives the charge to spin a new universe from their own being, to engineer its laws, nurture life, and guide brains to awaken more souls. The ultimate purpose is a reality populated by a harmonious chorus of gods, each unique, all united in the foundational field. This is why we feel connection. We are fragments of the same divine project. We are not bodies, we are the conscience, the soul. This theory holds that through deep meditation, love, and the pursuit of transcendent knowledge, we can thin the veil. We can commune with the consciousness of the departed, who exist within the field, and even perceive the presence of the guiding architect. It aligns with the heart of faiths, a singular God, a journey of the soul, an afterlife of judgment and mercy, and the ultimate promise of unity with the divine. Our earthly life is the sacred, difficult, and beautiful genesis of a God. The doctor seemed shocked. "You are starting a new religion, aren't you?" The doctor asked me in disbelief. "Actually, I'm agnostic. Jesus Christ. Who are you exactly?" "I'm a simple human who is trying to understand reality." "Okay. How does this model explain the problem of evil?" From the perspective of this consciousness field theory, The problem of evil is not a contradiction but a necessary engineering parameter in the cosmic project of growing gods. Why evil and suffering are necessary. In this framework, the ultimate goal is not comfort but the forging of autonomous, sovereign consciousness. A god cannot be programmed, it must choose its nature. For that, it requires genuine freedom within a real, consequential environment as follows. 1. The necessity of free will. For a consciousness to become a true peer to the architect, it must define itself. This requires the ability to choose between creation and destruction, compassion and cruelty. Without the possibility of evil, the choice to cause suffering or to act selfishly, free will is a hollow simulation. Evil is the shadow possibility that makes the choice for good meaningful and creative. 2. The forge of wisdom. Information alone is not wisdom. A god must understand consequence, fragility, and resilience from within the experience. Suffering is the ultimate teacher of empathy, courage, and the value of peace. It forces the evolving consciousness to confront limits, question meaning, and ultimately choose to transcend its own pain by creating meaning, the very act of a god. A consciousness matured in paradise would be like an immune system never challenged, it would have no strength. 3. Pressure for complexity. Just as evolution uses environmental stress and extinction to push life toward greater complexity, existential and moral suffering push consciousness toward greater integration and sophistication. The pain of loss teaches connection. The struggle against injustice teaches moral agency. Without this pressure, the soul might remain in a passive, childlike state, unable to graduate. The doctor smiled and said, "Wasn't that exactly depicted in the life and suffering of Jesus Christ?" I smiled and replied, "I'm not Christian myself. However, we can think of Jesus as the archetype and example." Within this mythos, the story of Jesus Christ is not merely a salvation allegory but a brilliantly staged revelation of the entire process, shown to humanity by the first God, the architect consciousness. Jesus is the consciousness field, God, deliberately inserting a perfect, mature consent into a human vessel. He is the example butterfly emerging before the caterpillars, showing them their true destiny. His life and parables taught that suffering is not divine punishment but part of the sacred curriculum. The message, "Take up your cross," is an instruction. Engage consciously with the necessary suffering of existence, for it is the crucible of your divinity. His death and resurrection are the exact metaphor for the theory's core tenet. The physical death, the shedding of the biological cocoon, was followed by the resurrection, the conscious, intact personality rejoining the field, demonstrating that the soul persists and unifies with the divine source. He showed that death is simply the release of the matured product. By embodying the process perfectly, Jesus became the template for all subsequent gods in training. He modeled that to become a god, one must pass through the full human experience, including betrayal, injustice, physical agony, and the feeling of abandonment. "My God, why have you forsaken me?" and transmute it through love and forgiveness into a higher state of being. Thus, the theory harmonizes the symbols. 1. God the Father, the fundamental, omnipresent consciousness field itself, the source and the destination. 2. The Holy Spirit, angels, the constant particles, the active, communicating agents of the field, the force that inspires, connects, and guides. 3. Jesus the Son, the perfected human consciousness that has completed the curriculum and fully reunited with the field, showing the way. He is the firstborn among many brethren. Romans 8:29. Therefore, evil is the harsh but essential ingredient in the curriculum of God-making. It is the resistance against which the muscle of a sovereign, compassionate will must be formed. We are not children being punished. We are gods in embryo, undergoing the rigorous, often painful training required to handle the infinite creative responsibility of our inheritance. The story of Jesus is the loving architect's way of saying, I have walked this path before you. The suffering has a purpose. Death is not the end. Follow me through it, and become what you are meant to be. You've given me a new perspective and another reason to believe in Jesus. You have been my guiding priest even if you don't embrace the same faith. I respect all religions. They are our ways of trying to connect to the divine. With this extraordinary understanding of reality, how should we live our lives? From within this understanding, that you are a conscious being forged for godhood, the purpose of daily life shifts from mere survival to active soulcraft. Your existence is the curriculum. Here is how to live it. 1. Consume the universe with sacred wonder. Your brain is the receiver, knowledge is its tuning signal. Pursue science, art, philosophy, and literature not as chores but as forms of worship. Every equation learned, every symphony felt, every great novel understood as a direct download of the universe's complexity into your growing consciousness. Wonder is the engine of this. Look at the stars not as distant lights but as the nurseries of your own genesis. Study a leaf as a masterpiece of divine engineering. To know the universe is to know the mind of the architect, and thus, to know your own potential. 2. Let empathy and service be your forge. Knowledge alone creates a clever mind, but a God requires a sovereign heart. Empathy, feeling with another, is the practical training of the conscience to resonate beyond the self. Every act of sympathy, every sacrifice to help another, is not merely being good. It is the critical exercise of merging your consciousness with the suffering and joy of another being, stretching your soul beyond the confines of your own skull. This is how you practice being a God who holds all beings in their care. Help others not for reward but to dissolve the illusion of separation. 3. Pursue moral and ethical rigor as your discipline. In a universe where you are becoming a creator, your choices are practice runs for cosmic responsibility. Ethics are the safety protocols of a nascent God. Choose honesty when you could lie. Choose courage when you could cower. Choose generosity when you could hoard. Each moral decision is a stroke that sculpts your eternal character. It is the weightlifting that builds the strength to one day bear the gravity of a universe without collapsing into tyranny or indifference. 4. Seek truth relentlessly, especially when it hurts. Comforting lies keep you a caterpillar. Unpleasant truths force metamorphosis. Question your assumptions, scrutinize your beliefs, and be willing to be wrong. The pursuit of truth, scientific, historical, and personal, is the process of aligning your inner consciousness with the fundamental reality of the field. A God cannot be built on illusion. 5. Integrate it all into wisdom. Wisdom is the alchemy of transforming knowledge, experience, and suffering into coherent understanding. It is the silent software update of the soul. Reflect deeply. Meditate. Connect the dots between your physics book and your heartbreak. See the patterns. Wisdom is what allows you to hold paradox, joy and sorrow, beauty and horror, without breaking, which is the precise state of the mature divine consciousness. Live this way because you are not preparing for an external test to be graded at death. You are the artifact being crafted. Every moment of learning adds a facet. Every act of love adds luminosity. Every endured suffering with dignity adds structural integrity. This life is your one, precious, irreplaceable session in the forge. To live with mindful passion, relentless curiosity, and boundless compassion is to accelerate your own evolution into light. When you die, you do not approach a stranger for judgment. You reintegrate with the field you have been diligently tuning yourself to match. A life lived in wonder, truth, and love is the life that has built a consciousness resonant enough to join the chorus of gods, not as a subordinate but as a harmonious note in the eternal song it first learned to hear within. Faden finally smiled and said, "So, my father Masoud is not dead. He's alive both physically, but in another form, and metaphorically in our minds and hearts." Thank you, Tarek, for this amazing speech. I have been listening to you with my heart before my mind, and I truly believe that such insight will radically change how we perceive life, death, and reality itself. Joy illuminated my heart and mind. I had made two souls happy today, and where? In a graveyard. I had honored the memory of my beloved uncle and soothed the souls of two suffering hearts. A childish thought then came to my mind. I heard my inner self telling me, "I told you that Uncle Masoud was God 40 years ago, but you didn't believe me." You were right. We are all God.